The small human research ship drifted quietly near the edge of the Crimson Nebula. Captain Wu Jin stood on the bridge watching the red clouds of space dust swirl in patterns that had puzzled scientists for decades. His crew was small but capable. Navigator Yun-Ha worked at her station plotting their next survey route. Engineer Tae-ho monitored the ship systems from his console. Medical Officer So-young reviewed data from their recent biological scans of nearby asteroids. They were not warriors or explorers seeking glory. They were simple researchers studying cosmic phenomena that most other species ignored. The galaxy considered humans to be weak scavengers who survived by avoiding conflict and picking through the scraps left by stronger races. Other species barely noticed them except to mock their soft bodies and peaceful nature. The Zephyrians called humans cowards. The Helix Collective viewed them as inefficient biological units. The ancient Stellar Dominion treated them like amusing pets. Across the galaxy, monitoring stations and communication networks carried casual dismissals of human capability. Most aliens believed humans would be extinct within a few generations. But Wu Jin did not care about such opinions. He found meaning in discovery and knowledge. His crew shared this quiet dedication to learning. They had spent 3 months cataloging unusual energy readings from this remote sector. The work was slow and careful, but it satisfied them. Then the sensors screamed. Yun-Ha looked up from her station with wide eyes. The readings showed something massive approaching through the nebula. Energy signatures unlike anything in their databases flooded the screens. Whatever was coming toward them possessed power levels that could vaporize their small ship without effort. Tae-ho checked the engines, ready for emergency jump to hyperspace if needed. So-young prepared the medical bay, though she doubted it would matter if they faced a hostile encounter. They were researchers, not fighters. Their ship carried no weapons beyond basic mining tools. The nebula parted like curtains being drawn back. What emerged made the entire crew fall silent. A dragon. Not the small flying creatures from human legends, but something vast and terrible beyond imagination. The being stretched nearly 2 kilometers from nose to tail, scales darker than space. Itself absorbed light and reflected it back as deep purple energy. Wings that could eclipse small moons spread wide as it moved through the vacuum. Eyes like burning stars fixed upon their tiny vessel. This was Calith, ancient beyond measure. One of the legendary void dragons that ruled the empty spaces between galaxies. Apex predators so powerful that entire civilizations altered their expansion routes to avoid them. The galaxy contained perhaps 12 such beings, and each commanded respect born of pure terror. But something was wrong. The dragon moved slowly, almost carefully. Dark fluid drifted from wounds along its massive flanks. Chunks of scale floated away into space. This titan had been fighting and losing badly. Wu Jin found his voice. Contact the other dragons. Even wounded Calith could destroy them with casual ease. No species in recorded history had ever survived direct confrontation with a void dragon. The smart choice was immediate retreat. Yet something in the creature's movements stopped him. Pain, exhaustion. The dragon was not approaching to attack, but simply because their ship happened to be in its path. It was seeking something, or someone. The dragon came to rest near their vessel. Up close, its wounds were clearly visible, massive tears in the membrane of its wings, deep gouges where claws or energy weapons had found their mark. This had been territorial combat with another of its kind. Such battles happened rarely, but when they did, entire star systems felt the aftershocks. Then, Calith did something no void dragon had ever done in galactic history. It spoke directly to them. Human vessel. The voice resonated through their hull without using communication channels, pure mental projection that bypassed all technology. I am dying. Across the galaxy monitoring, stations registered this unprecedented event. The mighty Zephyrian fleet paused its war games. Helix collective processors devoted computing power to analyze the situation. Stellar Dominion archives were searched for any similar occurrence. None existed. Wu Jin stepped forward, though his crew looked at him as if he had lost his mind. "What do you need from us?" The dragon's great head turned toward their bridge. Eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of civilizations focused on the human captain. "I have hatchlings, 3 younglings who have just broken from their shells. They cannot survive alone." The implications struck everyone simultaneously. Dragons were solitary creatures. They laid eggs and abandoned them. Hatchlings either survived through strength and cunning or died quickly. No parental care existed among apex predators. It was considered impossible by every xenobiologist in the galaxy. Yet here was Kalith speaking of responsibility and care for offspring. "I cannot protect them. My rival Nethys will find them and destroy them to prevent future competition. The wounds I carry will not heal. I need someone to guard them until they mature." The request was insane. Dragon hatchlings were still apex predators. Even newly born, they possessed power to level city blocks. Their instincts were pure predation and dominance. No species had ever successfully interacted with young dragons. Most attempts ended with the would-be researcher becoming a meal. But Wu Jin looked at the dying dragon and saw something else. Desperation, love, maternal instinct that transcended species barriers. This ancient being was making the ultimate sacrifice of its pride to save its children. The galaxy watched through 1,000 sensors as the human captain gave his answer: "We will protect them." Kalith's massive head dipped in what might have been gratitude or exhaustion. 3 objects detached from her body. Eggs, each the size of shuttlecraft, drifted toward the human ship. As they approached, the shells began cracking. Something moved within. The first hatchling emerged as Kalith's life faded, then the second. Finally, the third. Each was the size of a large dog, but clearly growing rapidly. Scales that would eventually become harder than starship armor gleamed wetly. Eyes that would one day burn like miniature suns opened for the first time, and they looked directly at Wu Jin. The galaxy held its collective breath, waiting for the inevitable slaughter. Every species knew that apex predators killed anything weaker than themselves. It was fundamental law of nature. Instead, the 3 dragonlings made soft chirping sounds and crawled toward the human ship, seeking warmth and protection. Kalith died, with something resembling peace in her ancient eyes. Wu Jin looked at the 3 small creatures now depending on him for survival. He had just accepted responsibility for raising the most dangerous beings in known space. The galaxy expected him to fail within hours. He reached out and gently touched the nearest hatchling. It pressed against his hand, seeking comfort. Maybe the galaxy was wrong about humans after all. 3 days had passed since Kalith died and left her hatchlings with the humans. The galaxy expected news of their destruction at any moment. Instead, monitoring stations across space received increasingly impossible reports. The dragon hatchlings were alive and growing. More shocking still, they appeared to be bonding with their human caretakers. Every major civilization had scientists working around the clock trying to understand what they were witnessing. Wu Jin had named the 3 younglings, based on their unique appearances. The first to hatch had deep red scales that seemed to glow with inner fire, so he called her Ember. The second possessed scales of pale blue-white that shimmered like ice crystals. Frost seemed fitting. The third hatchling had scales so dark they absorbed light completely. Shadow moved like liquid darkness itself. Each hatchling had grown rapidly in just 3 days. They were now the size of large bears but still acted like curious children around the humans. This behavior violated every known fact about dragon psychology. So young, the medical officer spent hours observing their growth patterns. The hatchlings ate constantly, consuming metal ore and energy crystals that Tejo provided from the ship stores. Their scales hardened daily, and their eyes began showing the characteristic glow of adult dragons. Yet they remained gentle with the humans. When Yunha approached with food, Ember would lower her great head and make soft, rumbling sounds. Frost enjoyed having her scales brushed by Tae-ho using maintenance tools. Shadow followed Wu Jin everywhere like a massive, devoted pet. The behavior was so unprecedented that the Galactic Science Council declared an emergency session. Representatives from 12 major civilizations gathered virtually to discuss the implications. Admiral Krath of the Zephyrian Empire spoke first. This is impossible. Dragons are pure predators. They cannot form emotional bonds with other species. These humans must be using some form of mind control technology. The Helix Collective representative disagreed through synthesized speech. Our analysis shows no artificial neural manipulation. The dragons appear to be responding to genuine care and affection from the humans. This suggests emotional intelligence in apex predators that our models cannot account for. Archon Vel from the Stellar Dominion was skeptical. Emotional intelligence requires evolutionary pressure toward cooperation. Dragons evolved as solitary hunters. There is no biological basis for the behavior we are observing. But the evidence kept mounting. Video feeds from the human ship showed impossible scenes. Wu Jin reading to the hatchlings from human storybooks while they listened with obvious interest. So Young treating minor cuts on their rapidly hardening scales while they held perfectly still. Tae-ho teaching them to operate simple mechanical devices using their claws. Most shocking of all, the hatchlings had begun attempting to communicate. They mimicked human speech patterns and seemed to understand basic commands. Adult dragons possessed intelligence, but had never shown interest in learning alien languages. These younglings appeared eager to bridge the communication gap. News networks across the galaxy broadcast constant updates. The Zephyrian Military News Service ran segments, titled Countdown to Catastrophe, predicting hourly when the dragons would revert to their natural killing instincts. Betting pools formed on dozens of worlds, with odds heavily favoring human casualties within the week. The Helix Collective assigned their best behavioral analysts to study every available recording. Their preliminary reports suggested the dragons were not just learning human behaviors, but developing entirely new social patterns. This challenged fundamental assumptions about apex predator evolution. Meanwhile, other void dragons had begun taking notice. Long-range sensors detected massive signatures moving toward human space. Ancient beings that normally avoided all contact with younger species were showing unprecedented interest in this developing situation. Engineer Bo-Ram arrived on a supply ship to help modify their vessel for its new passengers. She worked with Tae-ho to create specialized living spaces for the rapidly growing hatchlings. The cargo bays were converted into comfortable chambers with proper ventilation and waste management systems. Bo-Ram watched in amazement as the dragons helped with the construction work. They used their natural fire breath to weld metal joints, and their claws to manipulate materials too large for human hands. The cooperation between species was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Xenobiologist Haye Jin also joined the crew, bringing advanced scanning equipment to study the bonding process. Her initial findings suggested the dragons were not just imitating human behavior, but genuinely forming emotional attachments. Brain scans showed activity in regions associated with family bonding and protective instincts. This is revolutionary, Haye Jin reported to the Science Council. These hatchlings are developing social structures similar to pack mammals rather than solitary reptilian patterns. The human influence appears to be triggering dormant evolutionary pathways. The implications terrified many galactic leaders. If humans could domesticate apex predators, what did that mean for the established order? Species that had dominated through strength and fear suddenly faced the possibility that their power meant nothing against beings who created loyalty through care. Zephyrian Admiral Vex Tar placed private bets on the humans, lasting less than 2 weeks. His advisors agreed that once the hatchlings reached juvenile size, their predatory instincts would overwhelm any temporary conditioning. Dragons were weapons of nature, not pets. The Stellar Dominion began calculating threat assessments. If humans successfully raised these dragons to maturity, they would possess allies capable of destroying entire fleets. The balance of galactic power could shift dramatically toward a species previously considered irrelevant. But Wu Jin remained focused on simpler concerns. The hatchlings needed constant attention and care. Ember had developed a habit of bringing him small gifts, pieces of interesting metal or pretty crystals she found while exploring the ship. Frost enjoyed puzzle games that So Young created to stimulate her growing intelligence. Shadow demonstrated remarkable memory by perfectly recreating complex patterns shown to him once. They were becoming individuals with unique personalities, rather than mindless predators. Each day brought new evidence that dragons possessed emotional depth that previous studies had completely missed. The galaxy watched and waited for the inevitable disaster. Instead, they witnessed something that challenged every assumption about strength dominance and the nature of apex predators. 3 dragon hatchlings learning to trust. Growing stronger through care rather than conflict. Developing bonds that might reshape the balance of power among the stars. The humans had accepted an impossible responsibility and somehow seemed to be succeeding. This terrified some civilizations and inspired others. Change was coming to the galaxy, whether it was ready or not. 6 months had passed since Kalith entrusted her hatchlings to the humans. The 3 dragons had grown dramatically. Ember now measured 15 meters from nose to tail, with scales that glowed like molten metal. Frost had developed crystalline formations along her spine that created beautiful light patterns. Shadow could bend light around himself, becoming nearly invisible when he chose. Each dragon was now the size of a small shuttlecraft, but remained remarkably gentle around their human family. This continued to baffle scientists across the galaxy, who insisted such behavior was biologically impossible. Wu Jin discovered that the dragons possessed not just intelligence, but complex emotional lives that previous galactic studies had completely missed. Ember showed creativity by arranging metal scraps into artistic patterns. Frost demonstrated empathy by comforting crew members when they felt sad or stressed. Shadow displayed curiosity about everything, asking endless questions in his improving human speech. The breakthrough came when child psychologist Jin Wu joined their mission. He had studied human development for decades and wondered if similar principles might apply to dragons. Working with the hatchlings, he developed play-based learning techniques that accelerated their mental growth in amazing ways. Jin Wu created puzzle games that challenged their problem-solving abilities. He taught them mathematics through interactive exercises that they found entertaining rather than tedious. Most importantly, he showed them how to express their emotions through art, music, and storytelling. The dragons absorbed knowledge at incredible speed. Within weeks, they could speak multiple human languages fluently. They learned to read and write, developing their own unique handwriting styles. Ember preferred bold, dramatic strokes, while Frost created delicate, precise characters. Shadow wrote in flowing scripts that seemed to dance across the page. But their learning went far beyond academics. The dragons began showing moral reasoning that surprised everyone. When Taeho accidentally injured himself during maintenance, all 3 dragons immediately offered to help. They understood concepts like fairness, kindness, and self-sacrifice that apex predators were supposedly incapable of grasping. News of these developments spread throughout the galaxy, creating unprecedented debate. The Zephyrian Empire called emergency military meetings to discuss the implications. If dragons could be civilized, what did that mean for species who ruled through fear and intimidation? The Helix Collective devoted massive computing resources to analyzing every interaction between the humans and dragons. Their models suggested that dragon intelligence had always existed but had been channeled purely toward survival and dominance. Human care was unlocking potential that had remained dormant for millions of years. Religious leaders across dozens of worlds proclaimed various interpretations. Some called it divine intervention. Others declared it proof that all sentient beings possessed souls capable of growth and redemption. A few extremist groups labeled it dangerous heresy against the natural order. But not everyone celebrated these developments. The ancient Stellar Dominion viewed the situation as a growing threat to galactic stability. For millennia, they had maintained order through a careful balance of power between species. Humans successfully domesticating apex predators could destroy that balance overnight. Commodore Thane of the Dominion Fleet received secret orders. The situation required immediate resolution before it spiraled beyond control. His battle group consisted of 12 heavy cruisers and a flagship dreadnought, more than enough firepower to vaporize one small research vessel and its unusual cargo. The Dominion Council justified their decision through cold logic. If word spread that apex predators could be tamed, every species would demand dragon eggs for their own militaries. Wars would rage across the galaxy as civilizations sought to capture and breed the ultimate weapons. Billions would die in the chaos. Better to eliminate the problem while it remained small and manageable. The 3 dragons were still juveniles despite their growth. Adult dragons could survive direct hits from planetary bombardment weapons, but these younglings remained vulnerable to concentrated fleet fire. Commodore Thane felt no personal hatred toward the humans. They had simply stumbled into a situation beyond their understanding. The galaxy required strong leadership to make difficult decisions that weaker species could not comprehend. The Dominion had shouldered this burden for thousands of years. Meanwhile, on the human research vessel, daily life continued peacefully. The dragons had developed individual relationships with different crew members based on their personalities and interests. Ember loved working with Boram on engineering projects using her natural fire abilities to improve ship systems. Frost spent hours with Hyojin studying biological specimens and discussing scientific theories. Shadow preferred quiet conversations, with Wu Jin about philosophy and ethics. The dragons also played together in ways that reminded everyone they were still young despite their size and power. They created elaborate games involving aerial acrobatics through the cargo bays. They competed in contests of skill and strength, always careful not to damage the ship or endanger the humans. Most touching of all, they had begun creating art together. Ember would heat metal until it glowed, then Frost would cool it into precise shapes, while Shadow used his light-bending abilities to create stunning visual displays. Their collaborative sculptures grew more sophisticated each day, showing genuine, artistic vision. Jinwoo documented everything, knowing he was witnessing the birth of an entirely new form of intelligence. Dragons raised with love and education rather than abandonment and violence. Apex predators who chose protection over domination because they understood there were better ways to live. But sensors began detecting massive energy signatures approaching through hyperspace. The Stellar Dominion fleet was coming to end their experiment before it could change the galaxy forever. Wu Jin looked at the 3 dragons who had become like children to him and his crew. Ember with her fierce loyalty and creative spirit. Frost with her gentle wisdom and scientific curiosity. Shadow with his thoughtful questions and protective instincts. Soon they would face their first real test, not just of their physical abilities, but of everything the humans had tried to teach them about choosing compassion over violence. The galaxy would learn whether love could truly transform even apex predators, or if nature would finally reclaim its due. War was coming, and 3 young dragons would decide the fate of civilizations. The Stellar Dominion battle fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a wall of death. 12 heavy cruisers, arranged in perfect attack formation with the massive dreadnought Eternal Justice at their center. Commodore Thane stood on his bridge watching. The small human research vessel drift helplessly before his overwhelming firepower. Communications Officer Kyung-soo aboard the human ship received the ultimatum immediately. Surrender the 3 dragons for immediate termination or be destroyed along with them. The Dominion gave them exactly 1 hour to comply. Wu Jin gathered his crew and the 3 dragons in the main cargo bay. Ember had grown large enough that her head nearly touched the ceiling. Frost's crystalline scales caught the light, creating rainbow patterns across the walls. Shadow seemed to absorb illumination, making the space feel darker and more mysterious. The dragons understood what was happening. Their education had included galactic history and politics. They knew the Dominion considered them threats that needed elimination. What surprised the humans was how calmly the dragons accepted this knowledge. "We will not let them hurt our family," Ember declared in her clear, strong voice. Her scales began glowing brighter as emotional energy built within her massive frame. "The humans had given us life beyond mere existence. We choose to protect what we love." Frost nodded agreement while ice crystals formed in the air around her. The Dominion sees only weapons and tools. They cannot understand bonds forged through care and respect. We are more than they believe possible. Shadow spoke last, his words carrying quiet certainty. "You taught us that strength serves best when used to shield others. Today we discover if your lessons can survive in the fire of actual combat." Across the galaxy, monitoring stations tracked every moment of the developing crisis. The Zephyrian Empire watched with intense interest, wondering if their theories about dragon savagery would finally prove correct. The Helix Collective processed thousands of probability scenarios, all ending with human casualties and dragon capture. But something unexpected happened when Commodore Thane opened fire. The 3 dragons did not respond with mindless fury as every military manual predicted. Instead, they fought with tactical precision that no academy had ever conceived. Ember used her fire breath not as a bludgeon, but as a surgical tool, cutting through specific systems to disable rather than destroy. Her flames carved away weapon mounts and engine components while leaving crew compartments intact. The restraint shocked Dominion gunners who expected overwhelming retaliation. Frost created barriers of supercooled gas that absorbed energy weapon, fire protecting the human ship while limiting her own offensive responses. She could have frozen entire enemy vessels solid, but chose instead to disable their targeting systems and communications arrays. Shadow proved most unsettling to the attackers. He bent light around himself and his siblings, making them nearly impossible to target accurately. But rather than using this advantage for devastating surprise attacks, he focused on disrupting enemy coordination and sowing confusion without causing casualties. The 3 dragons worked together in ways that military experts had never imagined possible. They communicated through subtle energy patterns invisible to Dominion sensors. They coordinated attacks with timing precision that suggested shared consciousness. Most importantly, they showed mercy that transformed battle into something approaching. Art Communications Officer Minho broadcast the entire engagement across galactic networks. Species throughout known space watched apex predators fight, not like savage beasts, but like disciplined protectors following rules of engagement that minimized enemy casualties. The psychological impact was devastating for Dominion forces. Their crews had prepared to face monsters. Instead, they confronted opponents who fought with honor and restraint that exceeded their own military codes. Several ships ceased firing entirely as their crews refused to continue attacking beings that showed such mercy. Commodore Thane found his battle group systematically disabled without losing a single crew member. His weapons were gone. His engines functioned at barely 10% capacity. His communications remained intact, but only because the dragons chose to allow it. The flagship Eternal Justice drifted helplessly as Ember approached with careful precision. Her massive form filled the viewports, but her movements showed no aggression. She spoke directly to Thane through mental projection, as her mother once had with the humans. "We could destroy you, Commodore. Your shields cannot stop our fire. Your armor would not slow our claws. But our family taught us that true strength protects. rather than destroys. Frost joined her sister, positioning herself where her crystalline scales caught the light from the damaged Dominion ships. We offer you the chance to leave with your lives and your honor. Return to your leaders with proof that dragons can choose wisdom over warfare. Shadow materialized near the bridge, his dark scales seeming to drink light from nearby stars. Tell the galaxy that apex predators need not remain trapped by instinct and aggression. We have learned there are better ways to live. The engagement ended with something unprecedented in galactic military history. 3 apex predators had defeated a battle fleet through superior tactics, discipline, and restraint. They chose mercy over massacre, despite possessing overwhelming power to destroy their enemies completely. Tactical Officer Kyung-soo analyzed the battle recordings with growing amazement. The dragons had executed maneuvers that combined their natural abilities with strategic principles learned from human military texts. Jin-woo had read them stories of great battles where heroes chose protection over conquest. Those lessons had become reality. Commodore Thane faced the most difficult decision of his career. His orders were clear: eliminate the dragons or die trying. But his professional assessment was equally clear: these beings posed no threat to galactic order. Instead, they offered something new and potentially wonderful. He chose to withdraw his forces and report honestly to the Dominion Council. 3 dragons raised with love and wisdom had become protectors rather than predators. They represented evolution beyond what anyone thought possible for apex predators. News of the battle spread instantly across every communication network. The impossible had happened again. Dragons had not only survived military engagement, but had won through methods that challenged fundamental assumptions about strength and victory. The galaxy began to understand that something truly unprecedented was developing. Humans had not just tamed apex predators, they had helped them transcend their nature entirely. Ember, Frost, and Shadow had passed their test of fire. They faced overwhelming odds with courage, wisdom, and mercy that proved their human family had taught them well. The question now was whether the rest of the galaxy was ready to accept what these 3 young dragons represented. Change was coming whether civilizations wanted it or not. The age of apex predators as mindless weapons was ending. The age of apex protectors was about to begin. Word of the dragons' victory over the Dominion fleet spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, every major civilization was analyzing battle recordings and reassessing their understanding of human capabilities. The impossible had become reality, and the implications were staggering. Dr. Yeon-soo arrived aboard the research vessel 3 weeks after the battle. As the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies sociology, she had been commissioned to document this unprecedented development. What she found exceeded even her most optimistic theories about cross-species bonding. The 3 dragons had not simply been trained or conditioned, they had genuinely evolved beyond their apex predator nature through exposure to human values and care. Ember demonstrated artistic creativity that rivals found among the galaxy's most cultured species. Frost showed scientific curiosity that led to breakthrough discoveries in energy manipulation. Shadow displayed philosophical thinking that impressed scholars across dozens of worlds. But more importantly, they had retained their dragon nature while adding human wisdom. They possessed the power to destroy star systems, but chose instead to protect and nurture. This combination of ultimate strength with ultimate compassion created something entirely new in galactic history. Other species began approaching humanity with requests that would have been unthinkable months earlier. The gentle shepherds of Andros had suffered raids from aggressive neighbors for centuries. Their peaceful nature made them easy targets for conquest and exploitation. Now they sought human guidance in protecting their worlds. Elder Whisper Song spoke for her people during the first diplomatic contact. We have watched your success with the apex predators. If you can teach dragons mercy, Perhaps you can help us learn strength without sacrificing our values of peace and harmony. The crystal singers of the harmonic realm faced similar challenges. Their entire civilization was built around creating beautiful music and art, but this focus left them vulnerable to military threats. Ambassador Melody Bright requested cultural exchanges to learn human methods of combining creativity with protection. Even more shocking was interest from warrior species. A delegation from the Zephyrian Empire arrived requesting consultation on military reforms. Admiral Krath, who had previously dismissed humans as worthless, now sought to understand how weakness had become the galaxy's greatest strength. Your methods achieve victory through means we never considered, the Admiral admitted. During private discussions with Wu Jin, our warriors fight with honor, but we lack the wisdom to transform enemies into allies. Perhaps there are lessons we can learn. The ancient dragon Nethys finally arrived to investigate the situation personally. She was Kaleth's oldest rival, a being of such terrible power that her mere presence caused nearby stars to flicker. Most species would have fled in terror, but the three young dragons greeted their elder with respectful curiosity rather than fear. Nethys had come expecting to find corrupted weaklings who had betrayed their dragon nature. Instead, she discovered apex predators who had transcended limitations she had never imagined possible. The encounter forced her to question assumptions held for millennia. "You have become something I do not understand," she told Ember during their first meeting. "Neither fully dragon nor alien, but a fusion that should not exist. Yet you possess power I have never achieved despite ages of experience." Ember replied with confidence earned through months of human teaching. "Power without wisdom is merely destruction. Wisdom without power cannot protect what matters. Our human family taught us to combine both into something greater than either alone." Engineer Giho worked closely with the dragons to develop new technologies that merged human innovation with draconic cosmic awareness. Their collaboration produced breakthroughs in faster-than-light travel that reduced journey times by 70%. Energy manipulation techniques created shields stronger than any previous design. But the most significant development was philosophical, rather than technological. The dragons had begun teaching other species the lessons they learned from humans. Strength serves best when used to lift others up. True victory comes through creating rather than destroying. The greatest power lies in choosing mercy when revenge would be easier. These concepts spread throughout galactic civilization, creating ripple effects that touched every aspect of interspecies relations. Trade disputes were resolved through negotiation, rather than force. Territorial conflicts ended with shared development rather than conquest. Scientific discoveries were freely shared rather than hoarded for military advantage. The Helix Collective recalculated their entire understanding of evolutionary success. Previous models assumed that survival required domination of competitors through superior force. Human methods suggested cooperation and mutual benefit could achieve better results with lower costs. "We have been optimizing for the wrong variables," their lead analyst reported. Maximum individual survival may be less effective than maximum group prosperity. The humans appear to have discovered principles we never considered. Meanwhile, the Stellar Dominion faced internal crisis as member species questioned the foundations of their authority. If dragons could learn mercy and wisdom, perhaps other apex predators could evolve beyond their nature as well. Why should civilizations accept rule through fear when alternatives existed? Commodore Thane submitted his final report to the Dominion Council with recommendations that shocked the highest levels of government. The dragons represent evolution, beyond what we thought possible. Attempting to destroy them would be like burning down libraries to prevent literacy. They offer knowledge that could benefit all civilizations, but change brought challenges as well as opportunities. Several extremist groups emerged across the galaxy, viewing the dragons as threats to natural order. They launched terrorist attacks against facilities associated with human research, hoping to eliminate the source of this dangerous influence. The dragons responded to these threats with the same restraint they showed during military combat. Rather than seeking revenge, they focused on protection and rehabilitation. When terrorists attacked research stations, the dragons disabled attackers without injury, then attempted to understand the root causes of their hostility. This approach gradually converted many opponents into supporters. Beings who arrived planning violence often left impressed by the dragon's wisdom and compassion. The transformation was gradual but consistent across multiple incidents. Shadow demonstrated particular skill at reaching hostile minds during these encounters. His ability to manipulate light extended to creating visual illusions that helped others see situations from different perspectives. Many former enemies experienced moments of clarity that changed their fundamental beliefs about strength and survival. The galaxy watched in amazement as apex predators became teachers and healers rather than destroyers. 3 young dragons, raised with human values, were reshaping interstellar civilization through example rather than force. But greater challenges lay ahead. News had reached the galaxy's outer rim, where even older and more powerful beings dwelt. Ancient entities that had slumbered for eons were beginning to stir as word of the dragons reached them. The universe was about to discover whether human wisdom could survive contact with forces that predated current galactic civilization. The test of fire was ending, but the trial by cosmic forces was about to begin. 2 years had passed since Kalith's death, and her children had reached full maturity. Ember now stretched 40 meters in length with scales that could channel stellar energy. Frost commanded ice fields that could freeze entire moons. Shadow manipulated space-time itself, bending reality to his will. Each dragon possessed power to single-handedly destroy star systems, yet chose instead to protect and nurture life throughout the galaxy. The transformation was complete, but it was not the dragons who had changed most dramatically. The entire structure of galactic civilization had shifted as species learned to value wisdom over raw strength. The Human-Dragon Alliance had become a force for protection and growth rather than conquest and domination. Ambassador Hay Rim led diplomatic efforts from the new capital world of Haven. Representatives from 47 species had established permanent embassies requesting guidance on implementing human methods within their own societies. The waiting list for consultation grew longer each month as word spread of the remarkable results. The Zephyrian Empire had undergone the most dramatic transformation. Admiral Krath worked with human advisors to reform their military training, replacing brutality with strategic thinking and emotional intelligence. Zephyrian warriors now studied philosophy alongside combat techniques, learning that true strength came from protecting others rather than dominating them. "Our soldiers fight better now," Admiral Krath reported during a council session. "They understand what they defend and why it matters. Battles are won before weapons fire because our enemies see the determination in warriors who fight for love rather than fear." The Helix Collective had recalculated their entire approach to problem solving. Instead of optimizing for maximum individual benefit, they focused on solutions that elevated entire communities. Their processing power was now devoted to ending poverty, disease, and ignorance rather than calculating military advantages. "We have discovered efficiency beyond our previous models," their primary processor announced. "Cooperation generates exponentially better results than competition. The humans showed us variables we never considered in our calculations. Even the proud, Stellar Dominion had requested human advisors to help them understand how perceived weakness had become the galaxy's greatest strength." Commodore Thane now served as liaison officer, teaching Dominion forces the restraint and mercy he had witnessed during the battle with the dragons. The change had not been without resistance. Several Species initially refused to accept that apex predators could be civilized. They launched attacks against human settlements, hoping to prove that dragons would revert to savage instincts when protecting their adopted family. Instead, they discovered that the dragon's mercy had limits, when innocent lives were threatened. Ember Frost and Shadow responded with precision that was both overwhelming and carefully controlled. They would disable entire fleets without casualties, then spend days helping repair the damage while explaining why their actions had been necessary. These demonstrations gradually convinced even the most skeptical observers that something unprecedented had occurred. The dragons possessed absolute power, but exercised it with wisdom that exceeded most civilized species. They had transcended their nature through human teaching, becoming something greater than either species could achieve alone. Dr. Yansu published her final report after 18 months of continuous observation. Her conclusions sent shockwaves through academic institutions across the galaxy. "We have witnessed the birth of a new evolutionary pathway," she wrote. "Not biological evolution, but conscious choice to become something greater than genetics alone would allow. The dragons chose to transcend their nature because humans showed them alternatives worth pursuing." But the most significant development was still to come. Long-range sensors detected massive objects approaching from the galactic rim. Ancient beings that had slept for millions of years were awakening, drawn by reports of apex predators who had learned wisdom. The first ones arrived without fanfare or announcement, beings of such age and power that they had shaped the early universe itself. They came to judge whether this new development represented evolution or corruption of natural order. Ember Frost and Shadow met the first ones without fear or arrogance. They spoke as equals to entities that had existed since the birth of galaxies, explaining how human care had unlocked potential that had always existed within dragon nature. "You have become gardeners rather than harvesters," the eldest first one observed. "This was not predicted in our calculations of cosmic development. Perhaps there are possibilities we had not considered." The first ones departed after extensive discussion, leaving behind their blessing rather than their judgment. The dragons had proven that conscious choice could override evolutionary programming. Love and wisdom could transform even the most destructive forces into agents of creation and protection. News of this approval spread instantly across galactic networks. The last doubters were convinced. Humanity had achieved something unprecedented in cosmic history. They had domesticated the undomesticable through methods that strengthened rather than diminished their charges. New dragon eggs were discovered on remote worlds throughout the galaxy. Species that had once fled in terror now petitioned for the honor of human guardianship. They understood that caring for dragons was not just about protecting dangerous youngsters, but about participating in conscious evolution towards something greater. Wu Jin stood in the observation deck of Haven Station watching ships arrive from across the galaxy. Each carried representatives hoping to learn human methods of nurturing rather than conquering. The soft species that others had dismissed as weak scavengers had become teachers to civilizations that had dominated space for millennia. Ember approached, with the careful movements she had learned to use around smaller beings. Her massive head came to rest gently beside him, as she had done countless times during their years together. "Thank you, Father Dragon," she said, using the title that had spread across the galaxy. "You and our human family gave us something more precious than power. You gave us the wisdom to choose what we would become." Frost and Shadow joined them, creating a family portrait that would be remembered throughout galactic history. 3 apex predators who had learned love. A human who had taught them that strength served best when used to lift others up. The symbol of a new age where wisdom guided power rather than the reverse. The galaxy watched in awe as the soft species demonstrated that true dominance came not from the ability to destroy, but from the capacity to create, protect, and transform. Even the most fearsome creatures could evolve beyond their nature when shown alternatives worth pursuing. In the end, humanity had proven that their greatest strength was not technology or tactics, but their instinctive understanding that all beings possessed potential for growth and redemption. They had seen possibility where others saw only threat, and through their care had helped apex predators become apex protectors. The age of rule through fear was ending. The age of leadership through love had begun, and 3 dragons who had learned wisdom from humans would help shepherd the galaxy toward a future brighter than anyone had dared imagine. The soft species had inherited the stars not through conquest, but through the patient work of nurturing others toward their highest possible selves. This was humanity's true victory and the galaxy's greatest hope.